We chose to investigate the link between health and education in countries around the world. The two specific indicators we compared were child mortality rate and female literacy rate. Both have the advantage of being clearly defined and standardized in their measure. Child mortality rate is the number of children dying between the ages of 0 to 5 per 1,000 children born. Female literacy rate is the percent of the female population in a country aged 15 and above who can read and write. First, we examined the correlation between the two sets of data. On average, as literacy rates improve across countries, child mortality rates decrease. Based on this clear negative correlation, we can logically assume that as a country's population becomes more literate, indicating an increase in education, child mortality rates decrease. We then sought to investigate potential reasons behind why education would play an integral role in lowering child mortality. A similar negative correlation can be found between wealth and child mortality, while a positive one can be seen with literacy rates. Rich countries have better access to healthcare and stronger education systems. Higher GDPs indicate more schooling resources and thus higher mean years of schooling. This positive correlation is especially true with literacy rates among women. The wealthier the average citizen in a nation is, the more likely it is that its female citizens will be more educated. This is most likely because increasing education leads to an increase in a country's human capital and workforce participation, in turn increasing GDP. According to a 2007 UN study, while developed countries maintain an average of around 9 infant deaths per 1,000, lesser developed states had around 153 deaths per 1,000. Infant mortality rate is the number of child deaths between 0 to 1 years old per 1,000 births. The World Health Organization states that 99% of all infant deaths occur in low to middle income level nations. When the graph is viewed again with countries sorted based on income groups rather than by geographical region, it is clear that many of the countries in the world that struggle with the lowest literacy rates and highest child mortality rates are among the poorest of all nations. Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia are regions which the WHO has documented as making the least progress in neonatal deaths. It comes as no surprise that a UNESCO Institute for Statistics study found that Sub-Saharan Africa and South and West Asia accounted for 77% of the world's illiterate adults. We also reasoned that the higher a country's female literacy rate, the more effective and informed decisions women will make regarding maternal and childhood health. Better educated women are more likely to understand how to prevent childhood diseases and seek medical care for themselves and their children. In 1979, the WHO introduced oral rehydration therapy to combat dehydration from diarrhea, which accounted for 4.6 million child deaths annually in 1980. In addition to providing tangible aid, part of the WHO's efforts were focused on educating women on how to manage children suffering from diarrhea and how to prevent the condition. The program's report states that female literacy was also highly correlated with mortality attributed to diarrhea. Can we, however, infer from our observations that there is an inverse relationship between infant mortality and adult, more specifically, female literacy rates for all nations? To find out, we examined countries that stood out among the data, including India. According to a 2014 study from Allied Academies, which collected data from the past 4 censuses of 28 Indian states, female literacy has a definite bearing on infant mortality. The study compared the change in infant mortality rates and female literacy rates. The results depicted a decline in infant mortality rates as literacy levels for adults rose, supporting our initial assumption. Furthermore, in analyzing the data more carefully, the study found that the decline of infant mortality rates was not constant, but fluctuated at different points, which is demonstrated by the rapid drop of infant mortality rate when literacy rates increased to 60 to 70%. When we single out India and compare the same two indicators, it is easy to notice a sharp downturn in the childhood mortality rate when the literacy of adults reaches 60% around the year 2000. We noticed that a few of the countries with the highest child mortality rates and lowest literacy rates among females were Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Yemen. We hypothesized that these 3 outliers in the data could be partly explained by oppressive politics. The Taliban, an Islamic fundamentalist group that rose to power in Afghanistan in the late 1990s, imposed highly restrictive Sharia law, which prevented women from receiving education. According to the UN, only 12% of women in Afghanistan were literate in 2013, and 38% of primary school-age children, most of which are girls, do not have access to schools. Pakistan is ranked as the least gender-equitable country in the Asia-Pacific region by the World Economic Forum. In 2012, UNESCO reported that the poorest girls in Pakistan are twice as likely to be out of school as the poorest girls in India. In Yemen, girls face institutional barriers to education as well. UNICEF reports that nearly half of primary school age girls do not go to school, and that 2 out of 3 women in Yemen are illiterate. The lack of education for women and girls in these 3 countries is intrinsically linked to their comparatively high rates of childhood mortality. Because girls in these countries face institutional barriers to education, they are unlikely to have access to information regarding maternal and infant health. They are also far less likely to enter the workforce, and therefore less likely to have income to spend on necessary child, infant, and maternal health care. These examples portray the direct correlation between female literacy and childhood mortality rates.